Hi, welcome to Got Questions? I'm Parker, friend and right-hand man to Dr. William DePaolo. Will is an immunologist and he studies the microbiome since before it was actually called the microbiome, which it means he's been studying the microbiome for about 10 years. He studies the gut, and specifically he studies the bacteria that reside in the gut. In addition to running his own lab up at the University of Washington in Seattle, Will is the director of the Center for Microbiome Sciences and Therapeutics, CMIST. So in this last episode on polyunsaturated fatty acids, polyunsaturated fatty acids, Will and I talk about why this study is relevant to our everyday lives. So what he and Denise Shack, who was the graduate student on this project, what they found is that the omega-6 fatty acids actually worsen inflammation when the system is challenged with a virus or a bacteria. And in this case, the bacteria was Yersinia enterocolitica. So Will and I also talk about immunity and how it's presented in the news and social media. I'm actually just asking my friend and scientist boss what his opinion, what his thoughts are on how immune health is presented and talked about in the news and social media, because it seems to me, and I could be wrong, but it just seems like that word is not often very clear in headlines or in the short articles that I'll read that are meant for, people like me, the general public. So we talk about that, and it's kind of a fun discussion, I think. And with that, I give you my friend and boss, Dr. Will DePaolo.
Wow. And that story is another day, but that was the one where we did compare like the high fiber, high fatty, high omega soil diet versus the Western diet. And so we saw that there was like a really interesting immunological component that was induced based upon the omega-3 diet. So that's the tale of a different
So maybe we could talk about that next time, actually, and as well as Joe's project, the
diet and salt.
The salt. Yeah.
So I think basically why is this important? Why is this study sort of important in the long term things? I think that a couple of things. Studies have found that omega-6 polysaturated fatty acids worsen inflammation when you have challenged with virus or bacteria. So like if you're eating a high omega-6 diet and then you give yourself a viral infection or you get a bacterial infection, it has been shown that inflammation's worsened. So, and this could explain why. It could be making the bacteria or the virus more aggressive and leading to that higher level of inflammation. And then we basically found that so the other way that this could be important is like in like sort of meat processing plants and things like that. So like where your meat processing plants are like where your meat may be at more of a room temperature, or maybe it might be less of it's not going to be at your body temperature, but it's going to be less than that. So and that what that could mean is that if you have exposure to omega-6 and you have Yersinia in that gamish, like in that meat, then it could actually make it more virulent, so that it could help it survive better, so that when it finally gets to you and you ingest it, then it's all ready to go. So I think that's like, I mean, it's a little bit of a reach, but that's like, one way that this could actually affect people is that if you're making this bug better at room temperature, then, that can happen, and it does happen sometimes in the processing process. And then, so I think that, again, the take-home message is just that we have to have a balance of omega-6s and omega-3s, and that this is one instance that nobody's really looked at before, but how an omega-6 can affect our immunity to a pathogen, and how it actually works at the pathogen level to make that pathogen more virulent.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you just used that word, immunity, because definitely no one is thinking about that, which is interesting, because one would be thinking, oh, it's good or bad for me. It's making me either healthy or unhealthy. But it's sometimes interesting to me that when I see things in the news media or social media, no one, I feel like the word immunity is important, and it's not always used when it could help to explain things a little bit better, that that is your immune system, whether it's healthy or not, is something to consider when you're eating food. And I think that that's something, or it seems that way anyway to me, and maybe I'm wrong, but it's one of those things that I think that people aren't thinking about. Although I do think it's being talked about a little bit more these days, given the pandemic.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that, I mean, basically omega-6 and omega-3, their hallmark or their footprint is in immunity. So like these guys,
But
like,
I don't think anyone's thinking about that, right?
right,
Like,
right. Scientifically though, like that's where like we link them to inflammation, and inflammation is inflammation and immunity kind of go hand in hand, right? So like,
or
omega
I understand that, but I don't know that the greater general public necessarily understands that. And I think it's just a small word that isn't always attached to certain things, when maybe it should start to be thought of more often, the word immunity.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. And I think, so omega-3, for instance, like the good one, the one that you take it with your fish oil, that you have found in fish oil. So that's omega-3 fatty acids. So fish oil has a lot of something that gets broken down to, I'm sorry, it has a lot of these fatty acids that are known to produce anti-inflammatory
Got it. Okay.
carotenoids. I'm trying to, my pronunciation's off today with everything, salmon and eicosanoids. And this breakdown of omega-3 inhibits inflammatory pathways, like especially in those cells that respond to bacteria and virus. So that's immunity, right? So it's inhibiting the inflammatory response of your immune cells. And that's a good thing sometimes, because you need to have, when you have an inflammatory response or you want to create immunity to something, you have to have inflammation. And then you have to be able to turn inflammation off, because if inflammation keeps going, then you get autoimmune diseases or chronic inflammatory diseases or whatever. So omega-3 originally, it's like was first identified as something that, as a factor that inhibits those anti-inflammatory. So basically, so if you feel that you have uncontrolled inflammation, omega-3 fatty acids would be a good thing to take. And then whereas the inflammation caused by the arachidonic acid or the omega-6s, that they actually promote inflammation, and they somehow through the pathways, and they promote induction of cytokines and things like that that are going to contribute to the inflammatory response. And so
things that you need, you just don't need them all the time.
Right. And so in this case, immunity gets a little bit funky in the case, because they're both working on different sides of immunity, so like one's promoting inflammation and one's inhibiting inflammation, but both, you need an immune response. If you think about it, is both the turning on and recognizing something as foreign, having inflammation, getting rid of it, and then the resolution of that inflammation. That's all immunity, right? And then the recall response 2 years later, when you do the same thing and you ingest this dirty water, and then you get diarrhea again. So like your body responds faster because of that recall response, a memory response. That's immunity too. So like immunity is this, like, again, you get into a gray factor and people want black and white.
It'd be fun to actually talk about immunity sometime too, just and really what is inflammation. What does that actually mean? I mean, I think that could be an episode, because I think that's kind of a word that is used often that I mean, until I was in the lab, I didn't really understand exactly what that, I'm like, yeah, inflammation, I got a cut, it's red, that's inflamed. Like that's kind of what I understood.
I think that's an important concept that we can definitely go over. But in this case, back to the PUFAs and stuff, here we're showing that, we never really tested, we didn't do a lot with omega-3 in the system, because we saw omega-3 alone didn't really have much of an effect. but the omega-6 alone had an effect. And then if you paired them both together, then you saw that omega-3 inhibited omega-6. But on its own, we didn't see a response at the bacterial level. Like we didn't see a change in growth. We didn't see a change in adherence or anything like that. So we didn't, I'm sure molecularly there was probably a change. We just didn't go after it because there was no physiological response unless you paired it, unless you added it with the omega-6, and then we saw the inhibition. So it's nice because we're reproducing other literature that shows that omega-3 does inhibit or antagonize omega-6. But we focus on omega-6 in this context because we did see that all these like really cool features of Yersinia that don't really happen, like the virulent state at room temperature, the intracellular lifestyle, and the enhanced virulence in an animal model, all with the omega-6 treated Yersinia. So it was, and that's basically the story. So we kept it kind of small, and now we're shopping it around to see who will publish it. But that's so far so not good. But we'll see.
No one's buying.
No one's buying. No, we tried one journal and it was bounced from that, but we'll try again.
Keep going.
We'll have to talk about the life cycle of grants and the life cycle.
Yes, I do really want to talk about that, but I'm gonna run because I have to get the puppy out before I head to practice. So,
I mean, summarize it. I mean, I feel like I already summarized it once, so we don't have to do it again, but basically just eat a healthy balance, and just also a caution out here to everybody is that even like taking huge amounts of fish oil is probably not the best thing for you. Like anything in extremes is not good.
Modification.
Wait,
moderation.
Moderation. Again, it's the speech today. Moderation is the best thing with all these things. Like you don't want to overdo it with omega-6s, but you don't want to overdo it with omega-3s. It's a balance between the two. So I think that could be the take-home message of today. It's a balance. Balance. I'm gonna go get balanced.
So that wraps up the last part of this episode on polyunsaturated fatty acids. Acids. Keep doing that. Right now, Will and Denise, again, Denise Shack was the graduate student on this project, and actually now Denise is Dr. Shack. They're writing up the paper for this project, and hopefully that will be out sometime next year, 2022. God, I had no idea how long research takes when I first joined Will's lab, but it takes forever. That project was started a few years ago. Anyway, that project, the PUFA project, and the cancer polyp project, also we called it the colorectal cancer project, or Melissa's project, Melissa Cordehe's project. That project, PUFAs, and the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease project, NAFLD. Those are the three main projects in DePaolo Lab. We have a new postdoc in the lab, Joe Dempsey, and he's working on gut microbiome and salt. And when that project is further along, we'll do an episode about that. So in our next season, Will and I will get more into things, more into gut health. Specifically, we'll do some episodes on all the biotics, probiotics, prebiotics, and symbiotics. So we'll really start to get into nutrition a little bit. And if you've got questions about this project or any of the other projects, or maybe if you've got some questions about probiotics, because there's a lot of information out there and it's all kind of confusing, please drop me a note in the comments section or email me at aparker@medicine.washington.edu, or visit our website, yourgutquestions.com, and go to the contact page and send me a note that way. See ya.